what a massive game it was. People are calling it one of the best grand finals ever. And in recent times, I'd definitely say it's up there. Probably in the past 20 years of watching AFL footy, it'd be one of the top three probably that I've ever seen. It's probably I got a little bit of bias, obviously, with Sydney, but other than that, it was a massive grand final. Collingwood, of course, did come out on top in the end. I will say that the advantage call to Brisbane late in the game was very, very, very unlucky. I don't think it should have been an advantage. I think it was Bailey at the time who had the ball and kicked it forward. I don't think he would have heard it in that crowd. But nonetheless, I think it is good to see in the end that the number one team of the whole year did win the grand final. I think that's good. Collingwood, obviously being the biggest club in the land, great to see them win in the end. For AFL, I think it's good. For some people, I don't understand being pretty disappointed. For Brisbane fans out there, I don't think you should be disappointed at all. They played a massive game of footy. They'll be back next year. I'm very confident in saying that. They've got the list to go again. I think Chris Fagan, after the game, also even said that some teams lose a grand final and they come back and win the next one. So I'm definitely putting Brisbane down to do that. I can see them bouncing back really quickly, the Lions. They are just such a good team, and they were a kick away from it. They were so close. Every single time Collingwood got in front in that game, just took the lead, you thought about those sort of times Collingwood were going to take it away. And late in that last quarter when they got that 10-point lead, I think everyone, including myself, was like, that's it. Collingwood have got it. And then again, they kept on coming. McCluggage got the ball to Danaher, he snapped a quick goal, and those last minute and a half was insane. I just could not believe it watching it all the way down in Port Kenny of all things. Down in, it's like country, South Australia, down near the Eyre Peninsula, basically where the join is, well, not the join, but there's like if you look at a map, you'd see like a little bit of like a edge in it down the bottom. It doesn't matter. But anyway, yeah, watching all the way down there, 6 hours away from Adelaide, but it was a massive game. Everyone was enjoying it. Had a mate down here who was from New Zealand. He loved it. One of his first games ever seen, and he loved it. So I think it was definitely everything that everyone was asking for. The last few grand finals have been absolutely atrocious for non-supporters of each side, and I think it's just something that we needed to see. We need to see a close grand final, right down to the wire, all the way from start to finish, a close game, and we got it. And I think that's why a lot of people are saying it's one of the best grand finals ever. I think it will probably have to set in for maybe a couple of years, maybe just to see. I don't know in the heat of the moment if you can call it the best grand final of all time, just to let it settle a bit. See how we go. But I think honestly, just on how the game went, we haven't seen a grand final like that in a very long time. Probably even the 2018 grand final between Collingwood and West Coast, when West Coast won it with a couple of minutes to go from Dom Sheed. I think that was a very different game. Collingwood obviously blew out of the blocks, and then West Coast pegged their way back into it, and then were able to just jump them at the end. I think that's very different. The years when Richmond were winning them, all kind of Richmond dominated. A couple of years before that, it was all Hawthorn. 2012, I guess that was a little bit different as well. So, we really haven't seen a grand final like that in a very, very long time. I honestly can't think of a grand final like that since probably the St Kilda Collingwood, St Kilda Geelong era, way back then, so probably 13, 14 years ago now. And that one's probably a little bit young to go all the way back past like 2005 and 4, even when Sydney won it in 2005 and I cried when I was a little kid, probably like 5 or 6 years old. I really didn't appreciate it, and 2012 I appreciated it a whole lot more. And yeah, just I think Collingwood fans would be, 2010 they won it, and they've lost in 2018, so it's been 13 years. It's been quite a long time. Brisbane fans obviously waited a lot longer. They've been waiting since 2004, and unfortunately they may have to wait for another. They have to wait at least another year. But I don't think they could lose any fans from those games at all. Obviously, they were massive, and we'll get to the actual game itself. Talking more about the game. I think the Norm Smith medalist, obviously best on ground, was picked correctly. I think Bobby Hill was amazing. People watching the game for the first time, never seen AFL, were like, this guy's really, really good. He's really short, but he's really good. And I was like, he's done really well in this game, Bobby Hill. He was probably the match winner in the end, if you think about it. He kicked 4 goals in a grand final. Obviously it happens in big wins in grand finals, but to win in such a close game, pretty low scoring considering it was Brisbane of all things, and he was able to get on the scoreboard, and it was really the difference. I don't think Collingwood could find a goal kicker up forward for a lot of the game. Billy Frampton, he played well on Harris Andrews, but he couldn't kick a goal. Myercheck was pretty well held. Jamie Elliott was pretty well held. He just was the one to get out, and he was playing on a very good player in Starskovich. So I think he was amazing, and I think he did deserve the Norm Smith. I don't think that Dacos had the most disposals. I think he played pretty well, I will say. He kept on dropping his knees, and he hasn't done that, I don't think, most of the season. So I don't know where that came from, but I do think that was a bit rough on Brisbane, that he kept on dropping his knees and the umpires were letting him get away with it, but here we are. I do think that Brisbane got away with a couple of free kicks. I will say it was not the best umpired grand final I've ever seen, but I think the players played brilliant games. I don't think... if I had to pick a player for Brisbane who should have played better, it would be Eric Hipwood. And for Collingwood, I'd say it probably would be Billy Frampton at the end of the day. Maybe even Darcy Cameron to an extent. I think he was pretty poor. But at the end of the day, I think those three players had pretty poor matches. I think it does also bring up the question of if every single player who plays a game deserves a premiership medallion. I've kind of I've gone in and out of this argument or discussion in years. When I first heard it, I just thought it was a bunch of bullshit. I thought, well, if you're playing on grand final day, you're the one who's won it. I've kind of got to the thought that maybe it's not one game. I think that one game shouldn't give you a medallion. I don't think that's fair enough. I think if you play +5 or maybe something like that, 5+ games or 10+ games, even 10, I think is probably fair enough. I think also as well, it could even be like, they've played 5 of the past 15 games of the season. Maybe if they played the first 5 and then didn't play anymore, I don't think... I think there's definitely arguments to both sides. I do think, though, that a lot of players like John Noble and Taylor Adams not getting a premiership medallion is a bit tough considering they played most of the season and just didn't get there in grand final day. But again, John Noble got dropped. He didn't get... he wasn't not playing because of injury like Taylor Adams. So there's definitely ebbs and flows, and Dan McStay as well obviously did miss out. But yeah, I think it's very tough on a lot of those players, and I'm sure they're feeling a bit odd about seeing their mates going on and winning. You hear about players all the time, like Ben McGlynn for Sydney back in 2012, being sad at the time, obviously, that they won. Well, not sad, but he was obviously happy that his mates were winning a premiership, but he knew that he could have very well been out there and was sad. And you obviously hear about players who miss the grand finals and they cry, and obviously you don't. Obviously, it's I don't know how it would feel. Obviously not from first-hand experience, but it's just, yeah, it's really tough for a lot of players. I don't know how they fix that, the AFL. I don't know if it should be... I still don't think 1 game or 3 games, or even... Yeah, I think 1 or 3 games, it's not to say that you didn't, help the club this year, but, you weren't there to push them to a premiership per se, I think, anyway. But again, I've never played AFL footy, so what the fuck do I know? I just think that, at the end of the day, I think a couple of players got a bit stiff to an extent not to get a premiership medallion. I think that's a good discussion to have. But yeah, I think my thought process on that has changed over the years. And I'm sure there's a few players pretty disappointed at Collingwood who, weren't in that grand final team or that premiership winning team. So, I think that conversation will definitely be heard a lot more in the next couple of years. Congratulations to Collingwood. I didn't actually put an Instagram post on the votes. I would give 3 votes to Brad Hill. I think Bobby Hill, sorry. I think he was massive. Coleman, for me, Brisbane, I think he was their best player. I'd give him the 2 votes. And 1, that would be a tough, honestly. I wouldn't give it to Nick Dacos, to be honest. I'd have to think about that, honestly. I can even look at the statistics. I know I said that I wouldn't when I talk about Brownlow votes, but this is a Brownlow. Brownlow. Yeah. Tom Mitchell was pretty good as well. Maybe Jack Crisp. I think he was very good in this game. He kicked 2 goals. Yeah, I'd probably say Jack Crisp with the 1 vote. I think he was very good as well and was a bit Yeah, I think he's been a very unheralded player all year, Jack Chris, to be honest, at Collingwood. That's hard to say when all the media's about Collingwood. But I think Joe Danaher, I do want to give a special mention to him. I think he was very good in this game for Brisbane. I think there would have been a lot of talk about him, especially not delivering on a grand final day. And he was massive. And he almost got him over the line in the end because Eric Hipwood was pathetic, in my opinion. I think he had a terrible game for Brisbane and was hampering them a lot of the time. Yeah, I think that he had I was very disappointed by Eric Hipwood's game. He dropped a lot of marks. He was fumbling. I know a grand final is a huge a different kettle of fish than just a regular game or even a regular final. But he had some moments where he could have definitely brought Brisbane a lot closer to winning this game. And I just think that I know a lot of talk about Eric Hipwood is about his massive contract that he has at the Brisbane Lions, and I think it all has to be fair to be mentioned it because he hasn't played very well in the grand final, and the best players in the game are always recognised in the big finals and big grand finals, and he didn't stand up. I think Joe Danaher is starting to stand up. We've seen him in the first final against Port Adelaide kick 5 goals, in the grand final almost get Brisbane over the line. And Charlie Cameron, he had a pretty quiet first half. He lit up the game in the second half, or again almost got him over the line. Yeah, I think that despite a few new players, this was a very good grand final and arguably the best. I think that may be a big thing to say for some people, but as a neutral fan of that game, it was a good game to watch. And even though I was barracking for Brisbane, at the end of the day, I think everyone that saw that game would say that was a good game of football, and it's one of the best games of football we have seen. So I think clap all around for everyone playing in that game, the all 46 players, sorry. And also Craig McRae. I think he had a kid I think he mentioned that in the speech before they gave him the Premiership Cup. He mentioned that he got a kid and he got a premiership on the same day. He from 2 seasons ago being an assistant coach to now being a premiership coach is insane. The amount of time he would have had to spend to sit there and wait for his moment to become a head coach of an AFL team and then to become the coach of the biggest club in Australia, where they were in a pretty poor spot. They were down right in the lower part of the ladder in 2021, and 2022 they were a point away from a grand final, and now they won a grand final. So you got to give kudos to him, no matter what you think of Collingwood. At the end of the day, he was, a very good coach, and against his old side as well of playing against Brisbane. He won the 3 premierships there, I believe. I'm pretty sure he was there for all 3. Great performance, great effort from Brisbane as well. Chris Fagan, it's obviously tough, but I do commend him coming out and saying we're going to come back bigger and better next year. And I know a lot of coaches will say that, but at the end of the day, I think that Brisbane will back it up. And I don't think there's big talk. I don't think there's a big question mark on Brisbane next year. And I don't think there'll be a big question mark on Collingwood as well. I think that Collingwood could set themselves up for almost a dynasty moment here. We saw in 2011 they did lose. 2010 they won. 2011 they lost the grand final. 2012 they missed out in the prelim. So we'll have to see if Collingwood can go and continue from a grand final premiership in 2023. From a prelim in 2022. Can keep on going? I still think they have a couple of holes in their list, and they look like they could be filling them, a few of them in the trade period. I'll be interested to see how Darcy Cameron goes if they do look for Todd Goldstein. There's been a lot of talk about that. So I think that's definitely a good talking point for Collingwood. I still think they lack a little bit of, tall forward prowess, if you could put that. We do obviously have a lot of trade videos on the channel. We have a playlist of them if you want to watch them. I'm sure a lot of you are here because of that video, those videos. But yeah, I think Collingwood, I don't know if they'll have a big trade period, to be honest. They haven't been linked to many players. They've been linked to Buku Kamas of one player and Todd Goldstein, of course. I think it's a bit surprising they haven't been linked to Mabior Chol, but I think that could be an option in the end. Brisbane being linked to Mabior Chol, one. I don't know if they're linked to many others, Brisbane. So, and Tom Duday, obviously, but he won't be there for most of the year if he goes to Brisbane. So, I'll be interested to see how these clubs set up their list for next year. I think that Geelong and Sydney from the grand final, I think Geelong went the right way about it, but they just had a lot of injuries. I think Sydney went the wrong way about it after the grand final. They only got Aaron Francis of all players, and he had an okay year for the Swans, but I think that I mentioned it throughout the year as well, that if you're not going forwards, if you're not moving forwards and getting new players into your club, you're going backwards or not bringing in enough stuff. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, Sydney didn't play a lot of their draftees from the 2022 draft. So I think that Sydney looking in the right direction this year, but I do think that Brisbane and Collingwood still have to innovate, update their lists again, and I will be very interested to see what Collingwood do in the trade period, because I still think they can get a lot better, Collingwood, on their list. And I think Brisbane, they've got a very good list, and I don't know where they can really fill up on. I mean, maybe defence, and maybe just a little bit of more, depth. But really, I think Collingwood have a lot more room to improve, and they won a premiership of all things. So, yeah, I think both clubs in really good spots going into next year. Trade period's going to be massive as well, which we'll probably talk about a little bit after this. And great grand final, one of the best I've seen. So, yeah, I think that's where we'll leave the review of the grand final. One more thing I did want to say is we did do a couple of bets with my brother. And we did talk about at the end of last episode that whoever won this, lost this, would have to pay for a ring light for the podcast, and we both only got one. So we had first goal scorer of the first half, first goal scorer of the second half, most disposals, most goals, Norm Smith, and winner and the margin. We both didn't get first goal scorers for either of the halves. I got the most disposals. I did pick Nick Dacos. My brother actually picked most goals to Bobby Hill. He only picked 3 instead of 4, but we weren't really looking at that. We didn't get the Norm Smith either. I picked Joe Danaher. He may have had a chance if Brisbane did win, but I doubt it. And the winner was obviously Collingwood. We both picked Brisbane, so yeah, that's fair enough. So we both drew. So I think we basically came to an agreement that we'd pay half each for a ring light. I think that'd be fair enough.